Fortnite has had a lot of weapons. They're adding new ones all the time, and constantly bringing old ones back out of the vault. But every so often, a weapon will come back and it will be different. I am of course talking about the dreaded weapon rework. This has been happening for quite a long time now, and is in some cases more drastic than others. To really count as a rework, it has to be more than just a minor buff or nerf. It has to fundamentally change the functionality of how a weapon fires or performs. I'll be taking a look back at these reworks to determine, in each case, if the weapon was better before or after the rework. Starting with perhaps the weapon that has changed the most over the years is the Tactical Assault Rifle. This thing was introduced in Season 9, and basically the entire gimmick was that it's an assault rifle that uses light bullets. And John Wick, I guess. It was a fine enough gun. You either love it or you don't, and I personally found it to be incredibly underrated. The TAC rifle went pretty much unchanged for over 3 years until Chapter 4 Season 1, when it was suddenly given a red dot scope and a slight damage nerf. Just like most of the other red-sighted weapons in Fortnite, this means that the Tactical Assault Rifle was pretty busted throughout Chapter 4, but it was only available through a rare augment in Season 1, which makes me wonder why they even bothered to rework it in the first place. It just feels like a bit of a pointless rework for me. The Tactical Assault Rifle then got reworked again in Chapter 5 Season 2 as the first of a series of classic weapons to get converted to use bullet drop and weapon mod attachments. With a scope, this wasn't awful, but without a scope, this thing was unfortunately pretty much completely useless. It got a slight buff in Chapter 5 Season 3, but sadly that didn't save this variant of the TAC from being absolutely rubbish. However, just a couple of seasons later, with the release of Chapter 2 Remix, we saw the return of the Tactical Assault Rifle again in a brand new form. Now this thing is an absolute beast. This is essentially the Chapter 4 version of the gun, but with the scope taken off, meaning that it now has perfect accuracy with zero bloom when you ADS, without the scope, plus barely any recoil, which makes it perhaps the most accurate scopeless rifle in Fortnite history. Also, it sounds completely wrong. It is so loud, which I'm pretty sure was a mistake. I don't know. The original TAC AR was quite known for being pretty quiet. In any case, this variant of the TAC rifle is clearly just an absolute anomaly. It is so scuffed, but I do love it to bits. The heavy shotgun has seen maybe the craziest change to a shotgun. In Chapter 1, it's this pretty standard shotgun. Hits hard, but not as hard as the pump, but it has a further range, making it a good middle ground between the pump and the TAC. But then it came back in Chapter 3 Season 1, and suddenly it's a single slug shot. It has a long range, much longer than the original, but if you're even slightly off with your aim, your shot will either do max damage or absolutely none. Literally every single stat possible on the row changed for this variant, to the point that I don't get why they didn't just make a brand new shotgun instead. The heavy shotgun's rework really is just fundamentally flawed. It took a fan favorite weapon and completely ruined it. The weirdest change is that the reworked heavy shotgun has a longer ADS time than other shotguns in that loot pool, despite needing to ADS to be able to be accurate. Shotguns are important in Fortnite because they're reliable. They don't have the element of randomness that comes with things like bloom. The slug heavy is an exception to this, and functions more like a hand cannon, but with insane damage falloff. It really struggles to be so much as worth picking up as a shotgun, or anything else for that matter. The patch notes for this update also describe the reworked heavy shotgun as exceptionally reliable and consistent, which is really quite funny because no, it is not. The patch notes also note that the reworked heavy shotgun cannot penetrate through multiple targets like the classic heavy, which was apparently a bug they would fix 3 years later, and they haven't fixed it despite bringing it back multiple times. So yeah, really bad rework in my opinion, possibly the worst and most egregious in the entire history of the game. If you like this thing, then great, I'm happy for you. But I just cannot see a world in which this is better than the original heavy shotgun from Chapter 1. Chapter 4 also introduced a heisted exotic variant which penetrates through walls. This one isn't so bad. It justifies its own existence a little more, so I'll give it a pass. Another victim of Chapter 3 Season 1 is the grenade launcher, but in a very different way to the heavy shotgun. The grenade launcher originally was, well, a grenade launcher. You just shoot a grenade. The fuse would light, and after a few seconds and a few bounces, it would explode. Since Chapter 3 Season 1, the grenade launcher now explodes after just one bounce. Despite a nerf to the damage output, this rework still turned it from a pretty balanced explosive item to one of the best, most broken launchers in the game. Gone are the days where you actually have to account for the detonation time, just spam it below somebody until they inevitably die. In my opinion, this was another poor rework. The thermal scoped assault rifle in Chapter 1 was truly terrible, maybe the most useless assault rifle in the entire game, honestly. It was slow, dealt low damage, and frankly that stupid thermal scope did really not help at all. Then in Chapter 3 Season 2, it came back with a slight damage decrease, but a massive fire rate increase, taking the fire rate from less than 2 shots a second to more than 5. Unfortunately, this really only took the thermal scoped assault rifle from trash to slightly less trash. It was still severely outclassed by the Striker Burst, MK7, and a plethora of other insanely strong rifles present in that season. The switch from fully automatic to semi-automatic didn't help either, and the thermal scope still absolutely sucks to use despite the visibility improvement. I can appreciate the motivation for this rework, and don't get me wrong, this is a pretty noticeable buff. It's a good rework, but I just don't think that it was enough to salvage this gun from being absolutely terrible. The light machine gun, or LMG, also got a pretty hefty rework in Chapter 3 Season 2, but this one I just do not understand at all. They decreased its magazine size by a huge amount from 100 to 60, also decreased the fire rate while improving the reload time and ADS accuracy. The original LMG was useful for its high stopping power and large clip size. Wasn't particularly great at actually killing people, but the pressure at close quarters was only ever rivaled by the minigun. But this rework takes away that entire element of the gun. Chapter 3's LMG just kind of removes its high pressure gimmick and tries to make it a jack of all trades, but as a result, it really doesn't achieve much of anything at all. Really just a completely unnecessary rework. However, what wasn't an unnecessary rework was that of the infantry rifle. This was a really quick rework, happening not only during Chapter 1 itself, but also just one season after it was first introduced in Season 7. The infantry rifle's big gimmick in Season 7 was that, unlike pretty much any other weapon that isn't a sniper, it had bullet drop, but since the entire rest of the loot pool was hit scan, this means that it was absolutely worthless. So in Season 8 it got an epic and legendary variant, a slight damage nerf by a few points, but most important, it became a hit scan weapon, turning it into, in my opinion, an incredibly underrated weapon. Unlike, say, the guns that got converted to modular for Chapter 5, this feels like a much more impactful change because hitscan was the meta landscape for the first 4 chapters of Fortnite, so to have a solitary rifle with bullets drop just kinda made it useless. This was a crucial rework for making the infantry rifle a good gun in the long term. However, I think there is one rework in Chapter 5 that absolutely needs to be brought up, and that is of course the Stark Industries energy rifle. The Stark rifle was just hands down one of the best rifles in Chapter 2 Season 4. But then when it came back for the second Marvel season in Chapter 5 Season 4, they gave it the worst projectile attributes possible, and then gave it the longest recoil recovery time in the game, and put it against the Striker assault rifle, which is easily the strongest and most accurate modular rifle. Also, adding bullet drop to a gun that shoots lasers makes so little sense. They didn't do this with the Fallout laser rifle in literally the previous season, so I don't understand why this rework was necessary at all. Big downgrade. Saving the best for last, the Burst Assault Rifle has gone through quite a few changes over the years. The Burst Assault Rifle in Chapter 1 is infamous for being genuinely useless. No one liked it back then. It reached a point where Tfue begged Epic to vault it, saying he'd start buying skins again if they did.
Listen, Epic Games, I will literally support skins until I die if you guys just remove all the bursts from the game, alright?
And the best part is this worked. They vaulted it shortly after he said this. The launch of Chapter 2 not only introduced the greatest design for this weapon, the AUG, but they also buffed the hell out of this thing to become a really solid assault rifle. It competed pretty well against the standard assault rifle and heavy AK. The top tiers reset their first shot accuracy between each shot in the burst, meaning if you were standing still, it was perfectly accurate. Then in Chapter 2 Season 3, the Burst Assault Rifle reached what I would consider to be its peak balancing, as it switched from a 3-round burst to a 2-round burst model and buffed the hell out of its damage stats again. The stat rework here created one of, if not the best precision ARs in the game's history, capable of insane pressure power and just deleting people. The epic and legendary variants were also given extra ADS zoom, which made them even better. Actually, it's the exact same zoom as the hunting rifle, so it's really easy to track your targets. Those higher variants also retained the first shot accuracy between each shot in the burst, making this such a well-tuned assault pick for the rest of Chapter 2. Unfortunately, the awesome hunting rifle zoom was stripped away when the AUG was spun off into a separate new weapon, the Striker Burst, in Chapter 3 Season 2. However, the Burst Assault Rifle remained pretty much intact until Chapter 4 Season 1, where it was just massacred, dude. This is a tragedy. Here they made a slight fire rate reduction, reload time buff, increased recoil, reduced fall off, and that doesn't sound too bad on paper, but these stat changes genuinely made the item feel so much worse to use. The recoil feels extremely unwieldy to control, the spread changes make it far harder to land shots, the epic and legendary variants lost their first shot accuracy between bursts bonus, on top of the hunting rifle zoom being removed, and the firing rates change just makes it feel so much slower. On a statistical, numerical level, the gun isn't that much worse, but it just feels so bad to use now that I never want to pick it up anymore. And that sucks, because in Chapter 2, this was my favorite assault rifle in the entire game. That's every major weapon rework that I could find. If you agree with some of my takes, support them by using code Jakus in the Fortnite item shop. If you disagree with my takes, let me know by using code Jakus in the Fortnite item shop. I'll know. Whether we agree or disagree, it doesn't really matter. There's nothing wrong with that. Just so long as we can all agree that this is absolute dog shit.